There was a note on the countertop in the kitchen from Frank. Be back tonight. Karla was still thinking about the owl and the kids and what they were going to do today, and thinking about her engineer who had called off sick, and about Becca who had a cold. She didn't have time to wonder what he meant. She felt resentment creeping back in. She needed coffee. Her head was starting to hurt, and beneath the watery feeling in her ears, the buzzing sound hummed along. Karla made a mental note to call her doctor and schedule a visit. Mommy, Tommy spit on me, and... Molly was standing next to her, having creeped over, unheard at some point. And that's it, she finished. Did you see Daddy this morning? Karla asked her. Molly's face puckered, and she looked away. No. Okay, Karla said. Sorry, honey bear. What was that about Tommy? That night, Karla lay in bed a long time. Frank was not there. She had called his cell a dozen times. All had gone to voicemail, and his texts were a wall of blue from her, and nothing else. He was having an affair. Karla had been thinking as much for a long time. Would have been blind not to. But his not coming home, the not responding to calls or texts. If it wasn't an affair, it was certainly something as bad. She thought about lawyers she knew, private detectives. She thought she sounded ridiculous. What about the kids, the house, the cars? Karla hated to think it, but it did cross her mind. What would the neighbors and their friends think? The door to the bedroom creaked open slightly. Karla froze, feeling suddenly exposed. It was Frank, as if on response to her thoughts. She closed her eyes, pretending to be asleep. She felt afraid and a little silly, like a little girl playing a game to give herself the creeps. Karla could hear the shuffle of footsteps on the bedroom carpet, but too many footsteps, and in the wrong spot. Frank should have walked to the other side of the bed, his side. Instead, they were moving toward her. She opened her eyes and saw all three of them, their faces a blue of darkness in the shadows, their eyes wide and obtruding, almost bulging, even Tommy's. Frank, Molly, and Tommy stood at her side of the bed, all staring down at her, their faces slack and expressionless except for the eyes. The eyes were wide and empty with fright. Karla tried to move, tried to sit up, to roll away, but her body was frozen, paralyzed except for her eyes that followed them as they stepped closer. She knew if they got to her, if they touched her, that something bad, something terrible would happen. She knew that they could see her, too, and more than that, were aware that she was watching them back. At once, as if on signal, they stopped. Molly and Tommy stood closest, with Frank behind them. "They're coming home soon, Mommy," Tommy said. Then all at once they began to hum. The hum grew louder and louder. The bed was shaking now, rocking back and forth violently. Their mouths opened wide, and droning, buzzing, grating sound rose in volume and pitch. Wasps by the thousands, then millions poured out of their open mouths, and someone was screaming. Karla launched herself forward, half rolling off the bed and landing on her feet. She flung her arms out instinctively, but there was nothing to protect herself against. The room was still dark, though the light had shifted slightly, and she was alone. There were no wasps and no droning. No kids. No Frank. She flicked on the light. Karla saw an empty bed, sheets tossed aside like there had been an animal tearing through it. But no Frank, or anyone else. Karla saw her phone on the nightstand and picked it up. Still before sunrise, and the kids got up. She looked at the bed again and began to move. Her feet were carrying her before she really thought about where she was going. It was on the staircase when it came to her that she needed to find out what the hell was going on. At the bottom of the stairs, Karla turned right and faced the doorway. Frank's office was behind a simple, plain white door, the kind you could find in any home improvement store, and likely put in 2 sales ago. The office had originally been another master closet, long but narrow, furnished with outlets and shelving that had been removed. Normally, Karla gave Frank's space a wide berth. His work was stressful and took up a lot of time. Fuck that. She moved forward and pushed right on through. Karla wasn't sure what she'd expected to find, but it wasn't this. Boxes upon boxes were stacked to the ceiling in almost every open space. The office was so tight, Karla could barely fit in the little hallway between them to see the desk that was now empty. There was no monitor or laptop or stacks of notepads. No old coffee mugs, 2 days stale and starting to smell sour. The office chair looked grainy, as if under a film of light dust. Karla's heart did a little thump. The sound of clicking puckered its way down the back of her skull and into her neck. A humming sound. There must have been a fly somewhere in the room, she thought. Back upstairs, Karla found her phone, was about to call Rebecca when she saw the time. Shit, she thought. It had been early, but somewhere in her brain she had noticed a shift in the light outside, had realized time had moved. The kids weren't up yet, but they would be, and it would all start all over again. The breakfast. Today. The drive to school. Then she had to be back at her office, and already thinking about tomorrow. In the office. She hadn't checked her work email all weekend. Where was Frank? Where the fuck was her husband? Too early to call Becca. Not enough time. It was Groundhog's Day, she remembered. Kids, shower, them. Dress, them. Breakfast, them. School. Today wasn't an in-office day. Back home. What was she doing at work today? Jorge? Bob? The droning was back. She thought about work, felt a sense of what exactly? Fear? Or the slower acting but more potent dread? Droning. There was a sound from downstairs, a real one. One of the kids was coming up the stairs. Karla listened to the footsteps. 2 sets of them now, she was sure. Pat, 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 pat. Each one a little footstep closer. Her feet took her to the bathroom before Molly or Tommy or both made it to the top. Something just felt off. It was too much all at once, and she just couldn't make breakfast or talk kid talk or clean up more spilled milk and Cheerios. Not now. Just 5 minutes. She just wanted to sit on the toilet alone. Karla closed the bathroom door behind her, the droning a high-pitched whining in her ear now. It wouldn't be long before the owner of those feet were in the kitchen. Then, searching, wander into her bedroom before eventually finding her here. She locked the door. It was uncharacteristic, something she would normally never do, and she felt a twist of guilt. But they would be fine. She just needed 5 minutes. Karla sat on the toilet and held her head in her hands. Her ears thrummed. She needed to see an audiologist or call her doctor. The footsteps were in the kitchen now. Where was Frank? Who was he fucking? Were there any girls in his office she didn't know about? How would he have met them during lockdown? How did she not see this coming? A memory of him, years ago, before the kids, popped into her head. Frank and her buying coffee on a little date. The way the barista, some college-aged airhead with no responsibilities, had touched his arm when she dropped off the check. The way Frank had smiled and said, "Thank you." That smile. Karla felt the tears roll down her face before she realized she was holding her breath. If she tried to exhale, she couldn't keep it all in. She knew that. If she let it out, even a little, it would all come out. She heard the footsteps moving past the kitchen now. Not quite like she had expected. They were heavier, and moved with more of a purpose than children should. How long had he been cheating? Was it like this before the lockdown? If she called his office, would he be there? The footsteps didn't go toward the bedroom. Instead, she heard them turn and begin walking straight toward the other side of the door. Karla wasn't ready. She didn't want to make breakfast and drive to school and go back to work. She wanted to sleep, to crawl into bed and never leave. The brass doorknob to the bathroom turned, then stopped because of the lock. Karla turned to look and saw it wiggle again. Then she noticed the shadow on the underside of the door, and how large it was. The knob turned, then stopped, and jiggled a little again. "Hold on, baby," Karla said, wiping her eyes. There was a hard, heavy knock on the door. Then another 2 before Karla could register that whoever it was on the other side was big. Karla stood up and put her back against the wall. The knob jiggled again, and there was another knock. Boom! Then another boom! It didn't sound like a knock anymore. Now it sounded like whoever was on the other side was trying to push the door off the hinges. She didn't know what to do. "Molly?" Karla said. A stupid question, but the thought gave her a sense of comfort, even as unreasonable as it was. It was the kids. It was the kids. "Molly, you stop that right now." Her voice tried to sound commanding, in control. "Mommy will be out in a minute. You just wait, or you'll be in big trouble." The banging stopped. Karla watched the shadow under the door step back. Still one shadow. Still a big shadow. Then the footsteps began to move away from the door, and a more terrifying thought struck Karla like an iron bar. The kids! This time she realized, what if it wasn't the kids? What if it was someone else, in her house, with her children? The footsteps moved back the way they had come, toward the kitchen and the kids' bedroom. No! Karla rushed the door, sliding back the lock and flinging the door open. The heavy footsteps picked up pace suddenly. A door from the other side of the house slammed. She ran down the hall and through the kitchen, racing for the kids' bedroom. Not them. No, no, no. She leapt the stairs 2 at a time. Her arm flung the door hard enough to bounce it off the wall with a loud bang. Molly sat up sharply, clear alarm on her face. Tommy began to cry. "Where is he?" Karla said. Molly stared at her with big eyes. The droning was dying down. Tommy was red-faced, screaming. "Where is he? Where is he?" Karla raised her voice, head looking back from Molly to Tommy. Molly shook her head, wincing slightly, as if Karla would turn this panic onto her alone. But there was someone here. She had heard them. Hell, she had seen the door move. Karla made rounds through the rest of the house, even Frank's office, but found nothing. That night, she set up cameras around the house. She had found an old set of baby cameras in one of the boxes on top of Frank's desk. His phone still went straight to voicemail. Her texts a long, unbroken blue chain. The cameras, there were 3, were old. Outdated things already from only a handful of years ago, when they'd been purchased just before Molly was born. It took Karla a few minutes to figure out how to get them on the Wi-Fi. Frank had set them up the first times. Molly and Tommy had both insisted that they had been asleep. Karla didn't believe it, not completely. Someone had been upstairs, and that someone maybe had been big. But that didn't mean it couldn't have been the kids together, or Frank, or someone else. It didn't make sense, but Karla didn't think it had to. She called Rebecca after she'd put the kids in bed. "I'm sorry I haven't been in touch," Karla started. "Don't be," Rebecca interjected. "I've been sick the last 2 days, just completely run out." Karla shook her head, felt the wideness of the bed. "I'm so sorry. Why didn't you say something? I would have brought soup. Or vodka." Karla laughed a little. "God, I could use it too. The vodka, not the soup," Rebecca groaned. "I've been having such a hard time sleeping. I keep thinking about my mom." Karla felt a pang. She had known Jody, Becca's mom, very well. She'd been a sweet lady, but the kind who was tough as nails, too. Jody had been Becca's only parent since her dad died when she was 10. The cancer, a slow and drawn-out process of death, had been hard. Rebecca had never been the same, even 5 years out. But Karla hadn't heard Becca mention her in passing, outside of birthdays or her parents' anniversary, in all that time. "Bad dreams?" Karla asked. "Yeah," Rebecca said. "Or just strange, at least. I keep seeing her, I don't know." Karla almost laughed and wanted to say, "Tell me about it." She wanted to mention Frank, but the idea of it, of having to explain to her friend that her husband wasn't home, and she didn't know where he was, somehow felt like a weight. Like a lump of iron, or the old brass paperweight her father had. Like she had to swallow it. Instead, in the pause that followed, Rebecca picked things back up. So what happened with your neighbors? She asked. Karla thought her voice did sound raspy. Oh my God, I forgot to tell you, Karla said. They're gone. The trooper came by, and then at some point between grabbing the kids and calling into the dispatcher, they just... What? Rebecca asked. I don't know, Karla said. She thought she heard a cricket somewhere in the room then. I was on the phone with the dispatcher, and Molly and Tommy were fighting. I went back to check out the window, and they were gone. And then the police dispatcher got disconnected or something. Oh, weird, Rebecca said. Do you think they were taken to the hospital? Did you check? Karla felt a pang of guilt. Why didn't she think of that? The hospital probably wouldn't have told her much, but maybe at least if they'd been admitted, or if their family had been notified. Shit, no, she said. I didn't think of that. I should call and see if they were taken in anywhere. University or Mount Chapel, maybe? I got so distracted with the kids and just with everything else going on, I just forgot. Don't worry too much, Karla. You did the right thing by calling. They could have gotten pneumonia or something. Don't worry about it. They'll be home soon. What? Karla snapped, an edge in her voice. What do you mean? There was a slight pause. Are you okay? Okay, I was just trying to be nice. They were old people in need of help. I'm sure you did the right thing and they got the care they needed. They'll be home with friends or with family soon. I'm sure of it. Karla took a deep breath. She was being ridiculous. Something had just seemed... She didn't know. Off didn't seem the right word. Rhyming came to mind. Are you okay? Rebecca asked again. Everything's going to be okay. I think the whole world is just worn out. And this nonstop rain isn't helping. Didn't you say you had some vodka? They both laughed then, and Karla felt a moment of sincere thankfulness for a friend. Life could be hard. She was glad that at least she had Rebecca. And that laugh grew until they were talking again. This time about the simple, stupid things in life. Rebecca told her about the latest on the ABC network, and Karla sent her a few new photos of the kids. And then she was asleep. When she opened her eyes, they were leaning over her in the dark. The tall one and the two little ones at the foot of the bed. Karla tried to move then to speak. She was paralyzed. She couldn't do anything. She couldn't look away. And they were watching her. And they knew that she could see them. One of the little ones turned its head sideways and made a clicking sound. In the darkness, she couldn't see their faces, only their features. The little boy's mouth was not a mouth at all. Two mandibles extended downwards at wide angles. The tips, sharp carapace, tapped together and clicked. Rows of dozens of smaller mandibles, like little human arms and hands, rubbed together inside the mouth where children's teeth should have been. The girl and the man both tilted their heads in unison and clicked back. When their faces moved, Karla could see what were supposed to be eyes, bulging red orbs, black centers cross-eyed. They began to hum then in unison, their voices like sand blowing in the wind, dry and snapping and radiating outwards less like a human voice than 1,000 insect wings beating together. Karla felt wasps crawling on her skin and under the blanket. They hummed and hummed and hummed. The three moved their mandibles in rapid succession, eyes bulging sideways and mouths wide, so much like smiles. Stupid, faceless smiles that began to inch closer to her. They were moving forward slowly, humming. The things they called hands that should have been hands ran under the covers and over her body, smooth and hard and cold and pulsating. Their faces watched her, coming closer, inches away. The humming so loud now her whole head shook with the sounds of ants and beetles and grasshoppers and bees. Humming so loud beneath those awful smiles, and Karla wanted to scream. She wanted to scream and scream and scream, and someone was screaming. The sun shining through the window startled her awake. Karla could tell that the light was all wrong. It was too bright, and for a moment she thought she was late. Karla thought of the kids and school and her work, and her heart skipped a beat. She reached for her phone, where it should have been, before realizing that she was not in her bedroom. The light that was too bright was coming through the tall living room windows, the windows that had been left open, facing east, and carrying in with them the full glory of the sunrise. It hurt her head. What time was it? It took her a moment to sit up and get her bearings. She was on the couch. She had fallen asleep talking to Becca, but had woken up on the couch. Karla had a vague memory, quickly departing like morning dew of the night before, of the three, and the humming. Slowly, almost cautiously, Karla got to her feet and went to her bedroom door. It was closed, which was only strange because she was supposed to be on the other side of it. She opened the door, ready to grab her phone and get her day started, to understand what was happening. She froze and felt her brain do a flip, as if it struggled to comprehend what she was seeing. She felt dizzy, and the humming and clicking. Frank was on top of her. She was on the bed. Karla could see herself on the bed, and Frank, what was pretending to be Frank, was on top of her. She saw his mouth, long black beetle-like fingers extending from inside of it, stroking her cheek. Karla, the her on the bed, was stone white, eyes wide and looking at her, and she had a terrifying and strange sensation at watching herself from two angles. Frank lifted his head and turned to look at her, the real her, the one in the door, and she was screaming again. Karla shot out of bed, the covers rising as if they'd been lifted into the air by a volcanic eruption. Her feet moved, but still asleep, and she collided with the wall and fell backwards. She was in her bedroom. It was morning. She was alone. Karla turned her head frantically. She saw the bedroom door was open. It wasn't supposed to be open. Or was it? She was shaking, and her whole body was cold with sweat. Standing, she picked up her phone from the nightstand and checked the time. 7:19. Her alarm hadn't gone off, but had she even set it? Karla looked around the room again. She eyed the standing closet suspiciously and felt her face with her other hand. Then she went through the house, to the bathroom and the living room and the downstairs. Groundhog's Day, she thought again. She passed by Frank's office and then got the kids ready. Molly and Tommy argued about who had seen the flagpole first when pulling up to the school. Karla had been too distracted to notice who had actually called it. She kissed them both hard and then walked them to the class line. Without calling or emailing, she put an out-of-office banner up on her email and took the day off from work using her phone. She sat there in the school parking lot, watching the children file inside. It was calming, until she realized at a distance how much they looked like ants shuffling into one of their ant burrows, and that thought disturbed her, and so she drove home. Instead of cleaning the breakfast plates or checking her emails or even calling her doctor about her ears, Karla went into her bedroom and laid down. Then she opened the app on her phone that synced to the home cameras and pulled up the video from last night. She saw herself talking to Rebecca. Then the audio clipped on and she heard herself say, "I would have brought soup or vodka." She fast-forwarded. She saw herself moving in quick, rapid jerks as the video sped forward. Eventually, she saw herself roll over and close her eyes. The video rolled forward, and Karla watched herself like that for some time. The other two cameras, the one in the hallway and the one in the living room, seemed to show nothing change except for the light from an occasional passing car outside. Then Karla saw something, stopped, and rewound the tape. Karla watched herself on the video go rigid suddenly. She lay vertical on the bed, pressing her legs together and her arms to her sides tightly. Karla looked closer.